in India. Her research interests include the dynamics, magnetic buildup, and triggering mechanism of different types of solar coronal jets, solar filaments, and CMEs. And today she will tell us about flux cancellation. So take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction and inviting me for this seminar. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the triggering and formation mechanism of different types of coronal jet eruptions. Let me start with a brief introduction of coronal jets. Jets of all sizes are magnetically channeled narrow eruptions. They observed in the solar corona. They are relatively short-lived features. On average, their lifetime is about 10 minutes. They occur in very solar environments, including cold sun regions, in coronal holes. For example, here, this is an example of a coronal hole jet, and in and around the edges of active region. This is an example of an active region jet. The jets have been often observed in extreme ultraviolet images and in X-ray emission. They show a bright point at an edge of the base during the eruption. For example, in this jet, you can see this brightening is a jet-based bright point. You can also call them base brightenings or bright points. And next to the base brightening, there is always jet spire, this one. Active region X-ray jets were first detailed studied with a Yoku satellite, and polar coronal hole X-ray jets were detailed studied with Hinode satellite. A possible driving mechanism for these jet eruption is explosive magnetic reconnection. However, the triggering and driving mechanism for these jet eruption is not fully understood. There are some studies in which researchers showed that flux emergence may lead to these jet eruptions. There are also some recent studies in which mini filaments, small-scale filaments, are seen to drive the coronal jet eruptions. There are two main jet ideas. The one is emerging flux jet model. In this one, authors assume there is a dominant negative field in the background. An emerging dipole enters in the dominant polarity region, this one, and the minority side of this emerging dipole reconnects with the neighboring oppositely directed open field line at this location. This reconnection is known as interchange reconnection or external reconnection. This reconnection results into two new connections. One is this shorter loop, and other one is this open field line. The newly reconnected jet material escapes along this open field line. In this jet idea, jet bright point appears here, where there is a shorter loop over here. Recently, Sterling et al. Did an extensive study of 20 polar coronal hole jets using XRT and AIA images, and they found that small-scale filaments are the driver of coronal jet eruptions. These small-scale filaments are often known as mini filaments. So this is their sketch based on their observation. In this jet idea, they assume that there are two dipoles. One is this larger one. The other one is this small one. The small one is the one that contains the explosive field. The blue here is a mini filament, cool plasma here. Due to some unknown process, the mini filament field erupts outwards and it reconnects with the neighboring oppositely directed open field line at this location. When the mini filament erupts from this location, a jet bright point appears at the location where the filament was routed prior to the eruption here, where this thick arc is. As this field erupts outwards, it reconnects with the neighboring field and undergoes an external reconnection. This reconnection results into two new connections. One is this closed loop over the large dipole. The other one is this open field line. The newly reconnected hot material and cool mini filament plasma escape along these open field lines and appear as a coronal jet in XRT and EUV images. In this model, there were two open questions. The one was what leads to the eruption of mini filaments, and the second one, how and when are mini filaments formed. We investigate the triggering and formation mechanism of pre-jet mini filaments in a series of papers that I will show you in first part of my talk. And then in second part, I will show you the magnetic setting of small-scale jets known as jetlets. And I will also show you how these small-scale jets are miniature versions of chronojets. And at the end, I will show you why chronojets are analogous to CME-producing eruptions. To investigate the triggering mechanism of mini filament eruptions, we randomly selected 10 on-disk quiet region jets, and we tracked the magnetic field evolution of the jet-based region using HMI line-of-sight magnetograms together with the AIA images. So this is one of the jet example in the quiet region. You can see this is the region prior to the jet eruption, and there is a mini filament, small-scale filament present in the jet-based region before the eruption, this one. And if you see the magnetic field of this small-scale filament, it lies above the neutral line between the majority flux, which is positive here, and minority flux, which is negative here. During the onset of the eruption, a small brightening appears at the neutral line. So when this mini filament erupts, a jet bright point, this one, it appears at the location where the filament was routed prior to the eruption. So it appears at the neutral line. And later spire extends outwards. During the onset, we also observed some additional brightenings, these ones. They appear at the neighboring majority gravity flux patches. I will come to this point later in my talk. If you see the magnetic field environment, you can see that flux is decreasing with time. Okay, let me show you some movies for this jet example. This is AIA 171 movie. Here is a mini filament present in the jet-based region, the same one. Slowly it erupts and a bright point appears at the location of the mini filament. If you see carefully, all these jet-producing eruptions and jet bright points are similar to solar flare eruptions. So what happens in case of typical solar flares? A flare arcade grows over the neutral line in the wake of the solar filament. But in case of small-scale filaments, in case of chromojets, a mini filament appears at the location where the filament was routed prior to the eruption. These are the two flux patches that are involved in the eruption. You can see there is a clear flux cancellation goes on that triggers this pre-jet mini filament eruption from the neutral line. To see the magnetic field evolution quantitatively, we measured the minority gravity flux of the jet-based region bounded by this white box. This is the flux plot and versus time. It shows that flux is decreasing with time, which is a clear evidence of flux cancellation at the base of the jet. Jet happens at this time. Even after the eruption, the flux continues to cancel. Further, to present a clear picture of flux convergence and cancellation, we created this time distance map along the red dashed line for longer time period. I think this image is for 18 hours. And we noticed that initially these two patches that are involved in the eruption, they are far away from each other. With time, they converge and cancel and triggers the mini filament eruption following jet from the neutral line. Here at this time jet happens. And further cancellation goes on, and at the end, there is no more positive flux patch at the neutral line. So there were no eruptions. In this jet eruption, we noticed that there were two eruptions. So after the first jet eruption, the flux continues to cancel, that triggers the final jet eruption. Similar scenario of flux cancellation we observed in the remaining 9 events. We find that flux cancellation is usually the trigger of quiet region on-disk jet eruptions. We find in each of the 10 events, opposite polarity magnetic flux patches converge and cancel with the flux reduction of 20 to 60% until jet erupts. So this was the scenario in quiet region. We followed the same procedure and investigated the triggering mechanism in chrono jets in 13 on-disk chrono jets. This is one of the example. We can see there is mini filament present at the jet-based regions. Similarly, we have seen in quiet region jets. And then it erupts, bright point appears at the neutral line. If you see it looks like a baby flare arcade here. And if we see the magnetic field, the neutral line where this filament is residing, you can see it is clearly canceling. This flux cancellation triggers this mini filament jet eruption following chronojet. And these are the flux plot and flux maps that shows the further evidence of flux cancellation. Flux is clearly decreasing, which provides the clear evidence of flux cancellation at the neutral line. And in this time distance map, again, we observe the same scenario that two patches are far away from each other. With time, they converge and cancel and triggers the mini filament eruption following chronojet. So in all the 13 chrono hole jets, we find that flux cancellation is usually the trigger of chrono hole jet eruptions. In all these 13 events, flux patches converge and cancel with a flux reduction of 20 to 75% until jet erupts. On the basis of our HMI and AIA observations, we draw this sketch. In this one, we placed two bipoles here next to each other. One is this larger one. The other one is this smaller one, as we have seen in the observations.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? Sorry. So we don't see your cursor, but there is like a laser pointer feature on the bottom left of the screen that might help.
Oh, where? Sorry.
See down the bottom left of, no, when you're in presentation mode like that. So if you go back to presentation mode, full screen.
Yeah.
Then on the bottom left there is like a little pen icon laser pointer thing.
Oh, I have to exit the presentation mode, or I can just
no. Just go back to
yeah, I'm on the Google meeting right now. Yeah.
No, I mean on your PowerPoint.
Oh, on my PowerPoint, I see.
Yeah.
On the bottom left, you said?
Yeah, but you need to go back into full screen first. So to go back to present.
This one?
No, you go back. Just stay on the slide you were on, but put it into full screen. Like slideshow or whatever it's called.
Oh, okay, slideshow, right.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean this pen?
Yeah.
A laser pointer?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Okay, that works. We can see that now.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I was saying this is a sketch based on our observations. In this one, we show that there are two bipoles. One is this larger one. The other one is this smaller one. The smaller one contains the highly sheared field. The blue sigmoid-shaped structure shows the filament that resides above the neutral line between the majority gravity flux and minority. Majority in this sketch, we have drawn positive flux. Initially, these two patches are far away from each other, like we have seen in HMI observations. With time, they converge towards the neutral line and cancels with each other. The continuous flux cancellation at the neutral line eventually destabilizes the field that holds the mini filament plasma. The reconnection occurs among the field that holds the mini filament plasma at this location. So you see a jet bright point at the location of the mini filament plasma where it was rooted prior to the eruption at this location where my lower star is. As this field erupts outwards, it reconnects with the neighboring outreaching oppositely directed field at this location, and it undergoes an external reconnection. This reconnection results into two new connections. One is this closed loop over the large dipole, and the second one is this open field line. The newly reconnected jet material and cool mini filament plasma escape along these open field lines and appear as a chrono jet. So if you lay AIA observation on top of this sketch, it matches pretty well here. So here is the mini filament you see that lies above the neutral line. When this erupts, a base brightening appears at the location of the mini filament, this brightening. And these are the brightenings which I showed you in my talk in the earlier slides. those brightenings are the response of external brightenings that occurs at the base of these newly added loops. In this cartoon, this newly added loops are a little bit far away from this, but in observation, it's there. And then spire, in this example moves in this way, but in cartoon we have drawn in this way. So it is in, you can see the cartoon is based on our observation. So very recently, my RU student, Riley McLaughlin, she studied the triggering mechanism of 60 coronal jets, 30 in coronal holes and 30 in quiet region. She found that flux cancellation is usually the trigger of coronal hole and quiet region jet eruptions. So now we know that flux cancellation plays an important role in the triggering mechanism of coronal jet eruptions. Now the question is, what leads to the formation of these pre-jet mini-filaments? How do these mini-filaments form? Whether they appear just before the eruption or a day or so. To study the origin of these pre-jet mini-filaments, we track the jet-based region of our 10 quiet region jets back in time using line-of-sight HMI magnetograms, of course, on-disk jets. And this is one of the examples. In this one, we noticed that in the beginning of the movie, in the very beginning, there is no jet-based region and even no minority relative flux. Oh, let me stop this. Oh, it doesn't allow me to stop. Okay. Oh. Okay, so if you see in the beginning, there is no jet-based, there is nothing in the jet-based region, and even there is no minority relative flux there. So what happens? There is an emergence of a bipole here, this one, and 1 foot of the newly emerged bipole starts to converge and cancel with the neighboring pre-existing majority relative flux patch. So in this case, this newly emerged flux patch, this one, starts to cancel with the negative flux, which is already present there. So the cancellation goes on for some hours. After enough of cancellation, there is eventually a formation of highly sheared field above the neutral line, this one, that carries the cool plasma above the neutral line. This is a millifilament formation over the neutral line. After the formation of this mini-filament, pre-jet mini-filament formation, the flux continues to converge and cancel, as we have already seen in our earlier examples. And this cancellation triggers the coronal jet eruption. And you can see a lot of flux got cancelled here if we compare before and after. So flux cancellation leads to the formation of pre-jet mini-filaments, and further cancellation triggers the coronal jet eruption from the same neutral line. These are the time distance map for more detailed information, for the better picturization of this of the magnetic field. These maps are along these horizontal lines, and we measured the minority relative flux, not minority, negative in this case, bounded by this white box region, which is shown here. So you can see this map is for more than 12 hours, I guess. It shows that there is an emergence of a bipole at this region, and then soon after the emergence, it starts to converge and cancel with the neighboring flux over here. And then there is a formation of a mini filament. The blue line in all three plots shows the appearance of cool material in the EUV images. So you can see when the flux starts to cancel, mini filament starts to appear at this location where this white line is. As more and more flux gets cancelled, the filament becomes thicker and denser. As flux continues to cancel, you can see here, and it triggers the coronal jet eruption. And even after the eruption, the flux continues to cancel. At the end, there is no more negative flux at the base of the jet. So the same scenario of flux cancellation we observed in the remaining 9 events. We find that flux cancellation leads to the formation of pre-jet mini filaments. These results are consistent with the formation mechanism of typical solar filaments. For example, by models by Van Wallihan and Pete Martins. Okay, in some cases, we observe that there are more than a single jet eruption from the same neutral line. So what happens? A filament forms and erupts and then drive a jet. And either it reforms or reappear at the same location and then again erupts and drive the next jet. So this process goes on until all the monotopic flux patch has completely disappeared from the neutral line. For example, in this movie, we can see initially, okay, let me stop. Initially, there is no filament at this location. As soon as flux start to cancel, there are some weak flux grains that cancels, and it leads to the formation of this sigmoid-shaped small filament. And further cancellation triggers the first eruption, and then flux still continue to cancel, and then mini filament appears at the neutral line, and then again it erupts. So this we observed in, I think, 3 or 4 examples out of 10. Now the question is, from where do these magnetic flux patches come from? We find 3 scenarios. In some cases, we find that tiny grains of flux coalesces to make a minority flux clump, and then that minority flux clump cancels with the neighboring majority flux, which is already there, and triggers the jet eruption. In some cases, we find that there is an emergence of a bipole, and one foot of the newly emerged bipole cancels with the neighboring pre-existing flux, which results into the coronal jet. I mean, cancellation leads to the coronal jet. This is that example I have already shown you. In some cases, the monotopic flux pre-existed as it routed onto the outside of the sun, and we were unable to track. That is in the 2 cases. Okay, so after studying the formation and triggering mechanism of pre-jet mini filaments, we investigate the magnetic setting of jetlets and compare their physical properties with coronal jets. We also try to determine whether jetlets are miniature versions of coronal jets. Now, what are jetlets? Jetlets are small-scale jets, these ones. All these are jetlets. They were first identified by Raufi and Stenberg at the sites of, at the base of solar plumes. In this study, we find that jetlets occur at the edges of magnetic network flux lanes, and they are not limited to the base of the plumes. So if you see here, this is an iris image, and this is the base of the plume, this one. Some jetlets occur at the base of the plume, some occur outside the plume region over here in these regions, these ones. We also find that there are multiple jetlets at the edges of magnetic network lanes. From these 5 locations, we've identified 10 jetlets in total. I think in 2.5 hours of iris coverage. Yeah, so now I will show you an example from this location C. Okay, this is a small-scale jet seen by iris, which we call jetlets. During the onset of this jetlet, there are base brightenings at the base of the jet, as we seen in coronal jets. So it seems that the base brightening of jetlets are similar to the base brightenings of coronal jets. At the same time, you can also see these base brightenings in AIU 171 images. This jetlet is routed at the neutral line between the majority flux, which is positive here, and merging minority flux patch, negative here. The important thing is that even jetlets are triggered by flux cancellation. The continuous flux cancellation for about 4 to 5 hours in this case triggered 3 jetlets eruptions from the same neutral line. This flux plot shows the time of 3 jetlet eruptions, one over there, second and third, and there is continuous decrease in the flux. If you remember, in my earlier slides, I showed you that coronal jets are also seen to erupt multiple times due to continuous flux cancellation. So this result shows that maybe these jetlets are miniature versions of coronal jets. We find all these jetlets occur at the edges of magnetic network lanes, and they are not limited to the base of the plumes. They often come from the sites of flux cancellation between merging majority priority flux and minority priority flux. They show base brightnings similar to the base brightnings of coronal jets, and their average cancellation rates are also in agreement with the average cancellation rates of coronal jets. The difference is that their size scale. They are about 3 to 4 times smaller in base widths than coronal jets. Now, I will show you even further smaller scale jets that are recently seen by HIC. The high-resolution coronal imager was launched on a sounding rocket on 29th May 2018. HIC observed this active region in a 172 wavelength for about 5 minutes. During the 5 minutes of HIC observation, we identified 6 jet-like events that appear in the northwest field of view of the HIC in this white box region over here. And we noticed that all the 6 HIC jet-like events are rooted at the edges of magnetic networks. These all are HIC small-scale jet-like events, and the yellow circles shows the magnetic base of these jetlets. At the same time, these jetlets are also visible in AIA 171 images, but you can see that they are not as clear as in HIC. Okay, let's see some examples of HIC jetlets. During the onset of this jetlet, the plasma starts to move along the pre-existing far-reaching coronal loops over here and appear as a jet-like event. And this jetlet is rooted at the neutral line between the negative flux and merging positive flux. There is a weak evidence of merging flux, but still we can say that there is opposite flux that cancels and triggers this jet-like event. This is second example of HIC event. In this one, we observed 2 jet-like events from the same neutral line, this one. The first one was not covered by HIC, so we used AIA data to cover the first jet eruption. This jetlets show a base brightening that appears to include a miniature version of chromojet base brightnings. Here you can see this is the base brightening here, this one. And this jetlet is also rooted at the edge of magnetic network lane where discernible cancellation occurs. Okay, these are the other 2 types of HIC jetlets. They are different than the remaining 4 ones, not the remaining, but the other 4 ones. Different in the sense they are shorter in the lengths, narrower in the widths, and slower in the speeds. Their observed lengths, widths, and speeds are in the range of chromospheric spicules. They also show base brightnings during the eruption, you can see over here. And if you see the magnetic foot point of these jet-like events, they are rooted at the edge of magnetic network. But in this case, we do not see any evidence of opposite flux. Okay, so this is another example of network jets. Recently, we reported that counterstreaming flows in a solar filament are driven by network jets. This is a filament. At both edges of this filament, we observed multiple network jets. This is the iris image for this region, and you can see there is a jetlet. So iris shows very nice jetlets that comes one after other. They trigger flow towards right in the upper loop of the filament, and then jets on the right-hand side drives the flow towards left. You can see in this movie too. These jetlets are rooted at the edge of magnetic network flux clumps, like we have like the other jetlets that I showed you. And these jetlets are also triggered by visible flux cancellation. So these observations show that multiple jetlets at both ends of the filament drives the counterstreaming flows in the solar filament for about 2 hours. Okay, so now I will show you how coronal jets are miniature versions of CME producing filament eruptions. We study and follow HMI magnetograms for the small active region for about several days, from the time of their emergence till their eruption. And we find that after the 2 days of emergence, the flux starts to converge and cancel. If you see here, this is HMI magnetogram on 18th October, and after 2 days, you can see how much they converge. The flux convergence and cancellation at the neutral line leads to the formation of solar filament, this one, and further cancellation drives the CME producing eruption. This plot shows first emergence and then cancellation. So our earlier findings of pre-jet mini filament formation and triggering by magnetic flux cancellation is consistent with the formation and triggering mechanism of CME producing solar filaments. This is another example of a typical solar filament. This is in a quiet region. In this one, you can see this is a filament here that resides above the neutral line. We observe cancellation at a couple of locations, like at the neutral line here and here, but we measured here because this was easy to isolate this location. You can see there is cancellation going on. When this filament erupts, a flare arcade appears throughout the neutral line. So this is the flare arcade that I mentioned you in my earlier slides. If you compare this larger scale filament with small scale filaments, with so-called mini filaments, you can see they actually appear similar. This is the filament that reside above the neutral line. These patches show positive and negative, and same here. When these mini filaments erupt, the larger one erupts due to cancellation, they show flare arcades like this one at the neutral line. When the small scale filaments erupt, they show bright points. That's why we think the jet bright points are miniature versions of solar arcades, so flare arcades. So when these filaments erupt, they make CMEs, and these ones produce Chromo jets. Okay, here is the summary of my talk. From the study of about 100 Chromo jets, we find that Chromo jets are frequently driven by the eruption of a mini filament, and that the mini filament magnetic field is built and triggered by magnetic flux cancellation at the neutral line. We find that iris jetlets and high C jetlets are rooted at the edges of a magnetic network flux lanes, and they often stem from sites of flux cancellation between merging majority polarity flux and minority polarity flux. Their base brightenings, their cancellation rates are similar to Chromo jets. Our observations may suggest that Chromo jets and jetlets are miniature versions of larger scale eruptions that make CMEs. Of course, future simulations will provide more clarity on the formation and triggering mechanism of Chromo jets. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we already have a question in the chat. Shaq, do you want to ask it yourself? All right, if not, I can just read it out. So Shaktivel was asking, how often does the flux cancellation occur and form mini filaments when you have a purely bipolar region, and when you consider formation of a new set alongside the previous bipoles?
How often you mean?
I'm sorry, I mean, I couldn't get into first. The question, like during your initial slides, you said that when you have a bipolar region, it comes closer, and then you have this flux cancellations over there, and then you have filament formation. And then you also showed that there is another like a bipole, or like just another pole over there, like 3 poles over there, and then you say there is a neutral line in between, and then there's a cancellation, right? So I just wanted to know the difference, that if you have a purely bipolar region, and if you have, the same thing, if you have a purely bipolar region, and if you have this set, like 3 over there, so how often does this flux cancellation and the formation of mini filaments happen if you have a purely bipolar region and this one?
Whenever we have a jet eruption, and when there is a reconnection between, as I said, when this mini filament erupts and makes a external reconnection over here. So it doesn't matter whether there is opposite flux present nearby or far away, it always make reconnection. And this is always the case. So we never have just like single bipolar. You always need to have majority polarity flux, either it's nearby to the main bipolar or it is far away. If you see in, if you remember Chromo active region jets, so what happens, you always have a compact dipole near to the main active region. For example, in this one I was showing, so you see you have big dipole here, and then there is a compact dipole over there in the next to the active region. So whenever there is a jet happens, you always see base brightenings far away, because you do not have small majority polarity flux in the neighboring regions. You have bigger ones, bigger bipole. So this, during the reconnection, the external brightenings make new connections with the neighboring majority polarity flux patches. They may be far away. I think maybe, I don't know if I have image to show you. Oh, for example, this one, yes. In this movie, you can see when this jet happens, we see brightenings at the other end of here, this loop. So they do connect with the majority polarity neighboring flux regions. Okay. Is that what you were asking? So in quiet regions, coronal holes, these are nearby. In active regions, they are far away, but you often see.
Okay, yeah, good. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Alan, you want to ask?
Hi, Navdeep.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
It
was a very nice talk. I wanted to ask you, because the magnetograms are the discriminating factor that we use here. Can you please expand on how much we can trust the magnetic fields in a line of sight magnetogram when they are far from the center?
Yes, always. Okay, yeah, please complete. All these jets that I showed you here, they are near to the disk center. They are not near to the limb. And their threshold values are, I guess, 50, in the range of 50 to 80 Gauss here. So we are pretty sure that we are not looking to the noise in these ones. For example, these ones, these high C ones, here we are pretty close to the noise level. These ones, you can see these are very weak specs here. Their thresholds are about 20 Gauss. According to, there is one paper by, I think, Stanford group by Koviat, if I'm not wrong. In that paper, they have said HMI has a noise level about 7 to 8 Gauss. So we always make sure that we are above that noise level. And these jets, the ones I showed you here, they all are near to the disk center. They're not to the limb. So we are not considering there are not any projection effects in the magnetograms. I hope.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any questions from anyone else? Ricky?
Hello. Yeah, I have a question. So you discussed that there are jets. You had several instances of jets, and where you have them, you've shown flux cancellation in the particular way that you defined it. How often might you find similar flux cancellation and not have a jet? Is it an if and only if type situation, or?
Yes, it also happens actually. So I have seen many times that there is a flux cancellation, but you don't have a coronal jet. So I think you need to build a highly sheared field above the neutral line. Only then you can make a flux drop that can erupt and make a jet. So I think if there is a cancellation and there is not a jet, it means maybe there is not a flux drop over the neutral line. That's why you don't see any eruption. That's what I think.
Okay.
Or maybe it's not a cancellation, it's just submergence as it's shown in one Vallejoan's model,
Right. And then one other question, if I may. You've got your schematic diagram laid on the observations, the slide before part 2.
Right.
If we
This
could bring
one.
that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the next one, really, where you sort
This
of overlaid the things. I really struggle with this. I mean, what is it about the observations that are lending credence to this particular model? I mean, I see a particular morphology of fields, and then behind it, I see, you know, some bright regions, and I can't really tell if anything's following it. And you have 2 reconnection points. I mean, what is it about the observations that you think are in support of this model?
So this is not a model, it's just a sketch based on our observation, as I said. So are you asking that do we see 2 reconnections in our observation? That's what you are asking?
Yeah, I guess this schematic model, I mean, I got the impression that it sort of motivates your search, and the way that you presented them overlaid here, I was wondering if there was some correspondence here or not.
No, it is. That's why I'm showing. So as I said here, we have this internal reconnection in EUV images, in the AIA images. That's why you see a jet bright point, you know. It occurs due to continuous cancellation when the mini filament field erupts. Then you see a jet bright point, which is a response of internal reconnection over here. In all the observations, whatever I showed you today, we have more than actually 100 jets, including unpublished ones. We see all the time this internal reconnection, whether it's a confined eruption or it's a blowout eruption, I mean ejective eruption. And regarding this other thing, this external reconnection is very important. If you do not make this reconnection, it means your jet will not go out. So you need to reconnect, you need to open the capping field somehow. I did not say here, this is the black one is capping field. If you do not, you know, erupt the capping field, then jet will not go out. So in our observations, when this reconnection happens, we see brightenings, these ones. Let me show you this movie again. No, maybe this one. So these one, you see, before the jet eruption, there were no these external brightenings over here. And these brightenings are response of external reconnection. So what happens when this magnetic field from this minority flux patch erupts, it reconnects with the, I mean, it produces new connection because of the external reconnection. And these brightenings are response of external reconnection that occurs at the base of the newly added loop by the external reconnection. So this is the evidence of external reconnection in this model here. You see, we are adding, look, this is where we are adding new connection after this reconnection, and you see brightening at the base of this loop. Those are the brightenings due to external reconnection at the base of this loop. So that's why we say that in our observations, there are 2 types of reconnection. So if we do not see brightenings over here, it means we have not just we are not seeing brightenings. If there is an ejective eruption, you see both brightenings, this jet-based brightening and external brightening. If we have a confined eruption, you do not see these brightenings, you only see this one. So filament tries to go out, but because there is a strong capping field, then it doesn't you know, leave the solar surface. So this is the difference.
Okay, thanks. So I guess what I'm getting at is the things that you're looking at are the brightenings in specific locations along these field lines, but the lines themselves are more or less imagined, right? Because you don't.
Yeah, we do not have, yeah, right.
Okay.
That's what we assume, yeah.
Okay, I got it.
But for the bigger, for example, for the bigger jets in active regions, sometimes we also check by, you know, by adding lines from magnetic lines from potential PFS thing, potential field source surface, just to make sure. Yeah, but for these ones, because field is very weak, I mean, relatively weaker than active region, so we just assume this is our interpretation.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, very nice. I have a question, and sorry if you've mentioned this already, but the recent Parker Solar Probe observations of the very small flux ropes in the solar wind, and you know, there's one possible source would be the little blobs at the top of the streamers, but this strikes me as a potential alternative. Have you thought about that, and how common, how much of a feeder to the solar wind transient structures these sorts of events may be?
Yeah, so people have been talking about jets, and jetlets might be playing some kind of role in switchbacks. So I'm not sure about jets, because jets are very less in number in each day. They are just a couple of hundreds. But jetlets might be. They occur, as I said, in this small field of view that I showed you in Iris. This one, the back. This image, I checked that in 24 hours. In this field of view, you can see how small it is. There were 50 jetlets in this event. So if jetlets are occurring, several of jetlets are occurring in the base of the plumes region like that, they might be, contributing in switchbacks, and they can also reach. There is a recent paper by Sterling and Moore, in which they showed that if jetlets occur at a speed of, I think, 150 kilometers, they may reach to, I think, 6 solar radii in 25 minutes, something like that. So there are some possibilities. We need to work on that. Yeah.
So I had a question about, I guess part of the difficulty in diagnosing what's going on with these events is that you have the images in the corona or the chromosphere or transition region if it's Iris, but then the magnetic flux that you see is the photosphere. So I wonder if you could have magnetic field measurements higher in the atmosphere. At what cadence and what sort of spatial resolution would they have to be helpful for these jets?
You mean for the jetlets?
Yes, or any of them?
Yeah, actually we roughly estimated magnetic energies for these quiet regions and coronal holes. They are in the order of 10 to the power 28 arcs. They are almost similar to active region jets, I think, which are in the range of 10 to the 28 to 29 arcs. So because the field is relatively weaker in coronal holes and quiet region, of course, also for the jetlets. So now I'm hoping to have high resolution data from DKS to estimate these energies more accurately. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone else have any final questions? Okay, if not, then thank you again for a very nice talk.
Thank you all. And thanks everyone for joining.